Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to St. Louisville United Methodist Church. This is our prayer and self-denial program tonight. Every year, a call of prayer and self-denial encourages women to step out in faith and bring the love of Christ into the hurting world through their prayers and selfless giving, and empowering women to make a difference. We welcome you here tonight to pray, learn, and offer your support. That will make a real change in the lives of the homelessness in our community. As we unite here tonight, we also prepare ourselves to listen and to learn. As we learn about the impact of the call to prayer and self-denial, we also learn about the impact our support has on the community. As we generously support, we remember with confidence all that God has already done in and through us, and all that God has yet for us to join together to bring justice and inspire change. Kayla Hughes is going to come up and give us a devotion.
Well, for those of you that attended the board meeting last night, sorry you get a rerun, but that's the way it is. Last spring, sometime or other, Reverend Brian sent us an email, and I didn't respond at that time. One of those things that, I'm going to do that, but I just don't quite get it done. And one of the things in that email that concerned me was he was saying that he wasn't sure how he was being helpful. And I at the time, I remember thinking to myself, well, during the pandemic, he's been more than helpful. I mean, we had the sermons almost right away on the internet. And if you didn't have the internet, you could call in and at least listen to it on the telephone. And the Bible study, when we went on the telephone. So I was thinking that he certainly shouldn't be feeling like he wasn't meeting our needs as a shepherd. And also thought about it that sometimes it's kind of like teaching school. I taught school for a lot of years, and you don't know how much of an effect you're having or not having on the kids that are in your classroom. I mean, you calculate grades at the end of the 6 weeks or 9 weeks or whatever, and at the end of the year, hopefully they move on to the next grade, but you don't know what the effect is. So I think that's kind of like being a minister. It's very hard to gauge what you've accomplished with the people that you're supposed to be shepherding and providing leadership to. So I found this little story. I get this magazine called Plus, and it's a guidepost publication, and I really like it. I came across this story, and I thought it fit the situation. It's called Healer of Souls by Dr. Louise Reagan. Dr. Reagan, one of the church stewards, asked, "There's someone here I think you should talk to." It was late Sunday afternoon, the October sky already growing dark. The service had long since ended. Normally, I'd have been home by then, but for some reason, I was still in my office at St. Luke AME Church, lost in thought. Am I even making a difference? A question I asked myself again and again. Send them in, I told the steward. I had worked as a nurse for 30 years before retiring in 2010 and enrolling in seminary, but no amount of schooling could prepare me for the challenge of being a minister. Yes, I was still helping people, but not in the same way. As a nurse, I'd been able to see immediate results. People came in sick, we helped them feel better. Spiritual healing was different. You could encourage people to change, but you couldn't change them yourself. And even if you did help someone, there was no concrete way to measure it. Sometimes it was hard not to be weighed down by doubt. A woman appeared in my doorway. "Welcome," I said. "Please take a seat." I could tell that this wouldn't be a typical counseling session. This woman was hurting. Though she looked physically fine, something about her seemed fragile. "What's your name?" I asked gently. "Avitra," she said as she sat down, and tears already welling in her eyes. "What can I help you with, Avitra?" "I feel like hurting myself." Years of medical training kicked in. This was an emergency. Avitra told me she had been wandering the streets for hours. She'd passed several churches, there are many in this part of Newark, before something made her walk into this one. Between bills and caring for her children, she felt as if things were crumbling around her. "There's no hope left for me," she said in a broken voice. I knew I couldn't send her back out in the cold. She needed professional help. I asked if I could call 911. She agreed that would be best. When the ambulance came, I watched the paramedics help her inside. I didn't expect to see Avitra again. And I didn't until one Sunday a few weeks later. That morning, the pastor stood before the congregation. I was seated behind him along with other church leaders. "Is there anyone who'd like to share their testimony?" he asked. A woman in the back of the church stood up. I didn't recognize her, but she seemed to know me. All the way from her pew, I could feel her eyes on me. "I wanted to thank the lady sitting up there behind the pulpit," she said. "She saved my life." It was Avitra. Something in the way she carried herself made her initially unrecognizable to me. We spoke after the service. Avitra had brought her 4 young daughters with her. She'd never been a churchgoer. She didn't know why she found herself in my office that day. "I'm glad I did," she said, at the hospital she'd gotten the professional help she needed. I'm scared to think of what would have happened if you hadn't made that call." When Avitra came to the next Sunday service, we had a surprise for her. Church members had brought Avitra and her family a full Thanksgiving dinner. I'll never forget the tears that streamed down her face when she saw the little wagon we'd packed with food and decorated with ribbons. So different from the tears she'd cried when she had told me there was no hope. There are still things I miss being a nurse, but God blessed me to take care of his people physically when I worked in the hospital and to care for them spiritually now. Whenever I doubt that I'm truly making a difference, I look out into the congregation every Sunday and see Avitra smiling back. Have one other thing that I wanted to bring up. This book, Holy Humor, found it in my mom's library. She was a much more avid reader than I am, but I have been reading it this winter. And sometimes, I just crack up when I read this thing. It's written by a person who is part of the Fellowship of Merry Christians. And the theory is that we're all sometimes too sad. We're a bunch of sad sacks, and we need to enjoy the salvation that Jesus has given us. And so it's the book kind of goes through the year, and in this March section, there was this thing about Lent, which we're in Lent now. And I taught, part of that time when I was teaching, I taught in the Catholic school, Blessed Sacrament, down on East Main Street in Newark. And of course, not Catholic. So when Lent would come around, the little kids often would query me as to what I was giving up for Lent, because that's a big thing with the Catholics, in case you don't know. So sometimes I had some challenging and interesting conversations with the kids in my class and the kids there at school, because I wasn't necessarily giving up something for Lent, Although, I mean, I have tried that at different years, but sometimes I would be trying to do something maybe extra. So we had some interesting conversations while I was there for, I don't know, 8 or 9 years, I guess it was. But this, I thought, was really appropriate for all of us. Writing in the Arkansas Churchman, Betty Rowland suggests that many of us might be well advised to listen for Lent. How hard it is to listen, really listen, she writes. It's a habit, a ministry, a way of life, but it needs cultivating. Listen to your children, to your spouse, to an elderly person, to your pastor's sermons, to music, to the sounds of nature. Listen for God. Why not give up talking for Lent? I don't know. Brian said last night he was going to give up talking on Sundays. I hope he doesn't. But we do need to try to listen more to what he's saying, not just during Lent, but, you know, maybe that's what you can do for Lent.
Amen to that.
Okay. And happy St. Patrick's Day to everybody.
Okay, well, we have a special speaker tonight. Our speaker is Scott Hayes, and he's from Vertical 196. And I think you will be inspired by his sharing tonight about his organization and the needing of our support. Scott?
Maybe if you wouldn't mind, if you want to pass some of those out.
I will definitely do that. Oh, okay.
Good evening, everyone. Well, thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity and the privilege this evening to share with you. You're smiling now. Hopefully you'll be smiling when I'm finished speaking. I don't feel like one of my gifts is public speaking, which called as a pastor, that's kind of unusual, I suppose. But I did want to share a little bit about Vertical 196, and I'm just going to give you a brief history of that. So in 2005, my wife and I, we purchased an old elementary school in Newark, Hazelwood, not far from the Blessed Sacrament there, and we started a ministry called Look Up Ministries. And so we had that until about 4 years ago. We gave that ministry away. While we had that ministry, I was approached by the Evans Foundation. They had a building on South Fifth Street in Newark that formerly was the Red Cross, American Red Cross. Anybody been in that building, done CPR or anything? So you know exactly where Vertical 196 is located. So anyways, I prayed and I contacted Miss Wallace and told her, yeah, I think I could have a use for that. So I'm the chaplain in the Licking County Justice Center. So from 2014 until we actually kicked off the daytime drop-in center, which really got Vertical 196 on the map, I primarily used that building for recovery meetings and groups and for follow-up for inmates that were coming to Christ or that I was trying to minister to or counsel with, because you can't tell an inmate when he leaves, reoffend so you can come back in here and I can talk to you again. So it was just kind of a safe, neutral place for them to go. So for those first few years, we used it primarily for that. So I had some health issues. I've been the chaplain for 17 years in the jail. We had the Look Up Center. I had a little ministry called Psalm Cafe downtown Newark that was a Christian sports bar, coffee house. I don't know if anybody ever went there. And I had a couple of houses where we housed former inmates at the time. And so anyways, I had some health issues, and I visited a couple of doctors, and they were, independently, they said, well, you are stressed. You work too much. And I'm like, no, I'm not stressed. And they're like, well, your mind can be in denial, but your body's stressed, and that's what your health problems are. You need to give up one of those careers. And I thought, wow, I'm really going to miss the jail ministries. I'm really going to miss being the chaplain, because there was no way I was going to give up the Look Up Center. That was my baby. But after my wife and I prayed, and God really called us away from that ministry, which was very difficult to do, but I finally was obedient to God and gave that ministry away. Just soon after that, we were really noticing an increase in the visible homeless population, primarily in the downtown Newark and Newark area. And so I felt like I really want to do something, but I can't take on something else. I just gave something up. And so after prayer and discussion with my wife, we decided I would approach some area churches and I would help them to start a homeless ministry. So I met with different church leaders and boards and so forth, and they all thought it was a great idea. They all said we would support you if you did it. And so finally, in September of 2018, I decided on November the 5th, I already had the building, I was going to open up this ministry. So we opened up the Daytime Drop-In Hope Center, we call it, which is primarily known as Vertical 196. So we're open Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. To 2 p.m., except for when the weather's really cold. We work with the Licking County Warming Center Task Force that I used to head up until I gave that away last November. But anyways, we coordinate with them when we have to extend our hours. So what we're there, it's not an overnight shelter. They can't stay overnight. We're in a floodplain, but they can come during the day. So especially this winter, it was very helpful with keeping people probably from freezing to death. We did have a couple of cases of frostbite. So we have, on an average now, I think there's about 65 people that come during the day. They can get a hot meal. They can take a shower, they can get laundry, they can get supplies, they can get haircuts. We also really try to engage and minister to them because our methodology of what our mission and ministry is not to keep them in that condition of homelessness, but we want to really address the root of the problem. Why are you homeless? And then I just want to briefly share a little bit about my background. God had me doing on-the-job training. So I'm a former inmate. I've been incarcerated 13 times before I came to Christ. I didn't grow up in the church. I'm a former addict. I spent 16 years addicted to drugs. I would stick a needle in my arm, snort stuff, whatever. I'm not bragging about that part of my life, but what I want you to get from this, what I want to brag to you, is the transformational redemption of the power of Jesus Christ, which you all probably know. I'm definitely preaching to the choir. But that's why I am passionate and doing the things that we're engaged in. So we have many churches that help support us financially, hopefully prayerfully, but there's also some opportunities to serve, to come firsthand and to serve. If you ever wanted to come as a group, even a group as small as like 5 people, you wanted to come and try it out or come once a month, we would love to have you come. You could help prepare the meal, serve the meal, clean up, monitor showers, help do laundry. And then the most important thing I think that we do is what I've named tabletop ministry. And it's just really sitting down with somebody at lunch, eating with them, talking to them, listening to them, and just to hear their story. So those that come in and receive our services, we don't call them consumers or clients or customers or anything like that, or that homeless guy in the plaid shirt. We refer to them as friends or guests, or better yet, we learn their first name and we call them John. So those are some of the things we do. We also have an area, a small kennel area, because many of our friends, our guests that are experiencing homelessness have pets, primarily dogs. They won't come out of the weather without their pet. That's their family. So we have an area where the other guests can be safe from dog bite, but there's big glass windows and they can see their animals, and the animals can see them. We provide them with dog food or cat food, leashes, vet services. I even have a vet that will go with me to camps. We go into the camps and help treat the animals of those friends that are experiencing homelessness. But those are some of the things we do. And we also look at, when I talked about the root of homelessness, many times, and some of our volunteer staff were primarily ran by some volunteers, a lot of volunteers, but we do have a couple of paid staff that just for that continuity and that they're there on an everyday basis. But one of the things that was really important for me to instill in them is, they find a lady that's underneath, she comes in, she says, we say, where are you staying? I'm underneath the bridge, or I'm in an abandoned house, they call them abandos, or a car, or whatever the situation is. And the first thing that the volunteers and the staff says, we got to get her or him housing. And that is great. I mean, that's what you want to help homeless folks with. But if you're in full-blown active addiction, like I was in my life, and I get a house or employment or whatever, more than likely I'm not going to be able to sustain that because the addiction's going to creep up and it's going to cause a lot of problems. So I'm going to get evicted or lose my job or whatever, maybe get another eviction on my rental record. And so we try to look at, without being forceful with people, we just say, hey, would you consider going to rehab? And so if you got one of these, will you pass those out? Or you can give them later. Maybe they don't even want, but I just want to read you some stats just from last year. So I'm just going to, if you do happen to get one of these pages, I'm just going to go to the bottom of the page because I was primarily asked to speak to you on response of Vertical 196. And so Vertical 196 is not an independent agency or organization or entity, but it's a program of Licking County Jail Ministry. So if someone was to write a check, it would be written out to Licking County Jail Ministries, or the IRS recognizes Licking County Jail Ministries where they don't Vertical 196. It's not an independent agency. But some of the things that God is doing there at Vertical, just last year, we were able to assist 24 people that were experiencing homelessness. We were able to help them to provide shelter or housing for them. We were able to get 23 individuals jobs. 21 went to rehab, a residential rehab program, and they successfully stayed there. We probably took maybe another 30 to 42 rehab, and they just weren't ready. They didn't stay. But that number, that 21 is those that went to rehab and successfully completed them. We drive people as far as Toledo. I don't know how many people drive to Toledo. That's a long, boring drive. It's not bad when I have somebody in the van or the car and I'm driving there. You can talk, but on the way home, I'm usually tired. I'm like, man, this is a boring drive. But we also take them to some local places: Columbus, Lancaster, to the Refuge. If any of you have ever heard of the Refuge Ministries, it's a great program. But we provided 877 showers. 232 people did laundry. We don't count the clothes, shoes, and hand warmers and those sort of stuff because we would always lose track of that. So it's just countless number of that. 226 individuals got haircuts last year, and we distributed 321 Bibles. If you go back up to the daytime guests, we had 11,175 guest visits. That's not 11,000 separate people. Some of them come every day. But that's the numbers, and they each ate at least a meal. The meals would be higher than that because we offer seconds or thirds or till the food runs out. But so we had at least 11,175 meals. And then the stat why we do what we're doing, to me as evangelical Christian, is 5 individuals at Vertical made decisions for Christ last year and are engaged in church. So that's why we do what we do. You can feel free to look at those other numbers for jail ministries later on if you'd like. But those are some of the things that we do. Some pretty cool stories I think of an individual that was, he was addicted to meth. He was living in church outdoor stairways, underneath semi-trailers, wherever he could find himself. One of the first weeks that we were open, I caught him in the bathroom smoking meth, and he knows I work at the sheriff's office, so he's like, Scott, are you going to turn me in? I said, you know me better than that. I'm not going to do that, but let's really look at where you are in life and what we can do to help you. So I started talking to him about rehab, and of course he was tickling my ears, telling me what I wanted to hear, but he really wasn't ready to go. But several weeks later, I took him to a program called Refuge, or actually I directed him. I didn't drive him there to this particular one. But he went to the Refuge, and he completed a 13-month Christian residential program and was doing really well. And then he relapsed, and then I was like, oh, wow. But then he got himself back together, and he went back there, and now he's on their staff. So, and it was really cool because when he came to Christ, his nickname was Chaz or Chazzy. And then after he came to Christ, he says, I'm Chuck. So it's just a cool story. And I think about a lady that was a medical professional. I mean, here's a gal that, had a degree, worked in the medical field, had it all together, got addicted to drugs. So her and an adult son and 3 dogs were living out in the woods next to the river when I first encountered her. She also went to the refuge, is on a staff for another Christian ministry in Columbus. But those are just some cool stories. Many times it's frustrating there. I don't want to give you the wrong idea or scare you off from coming there and visiting or serving there, but I even, my lip was split once by a guy that I was really making some ground with while he was in jail when he was off of drugs. Well, he got out of jail, he was in our facility, and he was just kind of dazed, and so I went up and looked at him, and then he was looking through me, so I looked to see what he was looking at, and I turned back, and bam, he smacked me right in the face. But things like that happen occasionally, but fortunately we haven't had any other staff or volunteers ever struck. But we are a low barrier shelter. Do you guys know what the different barriers are in shelters? So a low barrier means you're reaching people where they're at. They don't have to provide a photo ID to prove their identity. They don't have to do a breathalyzer test or drug test to be able to come and receive your services. Most shelters are a high barrier. If you have certain criminal offenses, you can't come in and stay at the shelter or whatever. But we're trying to really reach people where they're at on the street. So, but those are some of the things we do, and I'd be willing to take any questions that anyone might have. Anybody have any thoughts or questions? Did I run you around in circles there?
About how many women do you through?
Women as guests or volunteers? You mean come as guests? It's probably 40%. So just under half are females. Yeah. So probably 38 to 40%, I'd say is a pretty accurate number. Yes. I don't want to sound corny about this, but we really would covet your prayers if you could pray for our ministry. That's the primary thing that I'm looking for when I'm trying to solicit our ministries or whatnot. And then if you do Facebook, we usually keep a current needs list on Facebook. I don't know, right now it might be like spaghetti sauce and noodles, just things that help us. We do have groups that come in and they kind of adopt a day. Like there are some churches that come like today, every other Tuesday. There's 2 different churches that alternate and they provide the meal. But we also, when we can get food, especially like beef, ground beef, donated or spaghetti sauce or whatever, we make it available to them, even though they might prepare it off-site the day or night before, or they might come and cook that day. It's really at their discretion how they do that. We can use a lot of items like that. Through the winter, we really needed hats, gloves, coats, disposable hand and foot warmers. Those are some great items. Now it's warming up. We won't need as many of those type of items. But even little things that you can put together, little care packs, which I want to give you a little bit of advice. I don't know how many of you are bold enough to engage with somebody that's outside of Walmart or on an exit ramp with a sign that says, "We'll work for food." Do you ever stop and encounter people like that? So my policy, and one of the policies, if you ever come to be a volunteer at Vertical, is you're not allowed to give anybody money for anything, no matter what their story they tell you. Their kids are starving, they need food, whatever. Because I was that guy when I was a drug addict. I would say, if I could just get $5, I need to get a cab so I can get to my grandma's at OSU and she's dying. Well, my grandmother, she killed herself when I was 11. That was the only grandparent I had in my life. So it wasn't even a real story. But, oh, young man, here's $20. Well, after I had 5 of those, I can go buy a gram of meth, So we don't give money. We try to help meet the needs the best that we can directly. But I would say, if you're going to encounter somebody, have a little care packet in your car. In all the vehicles that we have a lot of extra stuff maybe that you wouldn't, like sleeping bags, coats, those kind of things. But if you just kept like a gallon-sized Ziploc bag, you put a bottle of water, a granola bar, a pocket Bible, a little flashlight, a thing of chapstick, something like that, that's pretty meaningful to them, even though sometimes they just really want the money because a lot of those people are in full-blown active addiction and they just want money to get high. So possibly another great idea, we do those as well, at $5 increments. So we do McDonald's, Wendy's, and Subway, mainly the ones we use, but then I have business cards that has the Vertical information, our hours, our address, our phone number, and I tape it to the back of that card, so when I encounter somebody, And it's amazing. Within a day or two of giving one of those cards out here locally, I'll see that person maybe for the first time come through our doors, that vertical. Just gives them some direction to come there, but very good. You can. Oh, yeah, that'd be great. Many churches will do that. Some churches especially through the wintertime, because there's a large percentage of the homeless population that live in automobiles, and so they need gas. So we get, I'm promoting a certain gas station because they have fuel-only cards, so you can't go in there and buy beer or trade something, you know. So, and we buy them or ask those to be in $10 increments, so they're not way too much, but enough to give a little bit of gas and that sort of stuff. So, so either way. But I was just saying, if you personally were going to encounter somebody, that was my advice or my suggestion. So, you know, take that for what it's worth. I'm not an expert. I'm a former street kid, so I have some credibility with that population. So, and many times when I encounter somebody that's kind of giving me grief or whatever, one of the other people that know me come up and say, "Hey, hold on, that's Scott. He's one of us," you know. So, so there's a little bit of respect, even though Zach hit me in the face, but that's a whole other story. No, and we don't do a lot of clothes now because there are at least 7 ministries, or not all ministries, organizations within walking distance of our facility. And what we see is, if you look at that number of the laundry, that 232, that's a pretty low number for how many clothes we give out. So we don't give out a lot of clothes like we used to. We used to have a clothing closet a couple days a week, and they could come get whatever. What we were experiencing is they were leaving their clothes that were dirty, but they were good. They just needed washed. They were leaving them in, you know, behind the building, in the parking lot, in the restroom, and they had an opportunity to wash clothes. So then I decided we're not using God's resources very wisely. We prayed as a team, and we thought, okay, for somebody to be able to get a new coat, new jeans, a whole new outfit, they have to do their laundry. So we tried to do that, and then many of them still wouldn't do that. They would just go down the street, these other ministries, throw their old clothes down and get new clothes. And I thought, I don't think this is what we're going to do. So we do give out in the winter, especially like sweat clothes. But we used to have a lot of jeans and T-shirts, and we do some things. But we always do coats and shoes and boots and those sort of things, the hats, the gloves. I don't want to sound cold-hearted or rude, but I just feel like it's not really instilling good, godly practices for them just to say, you know, I don't get to go home and just throw my clothes away and get a new outfit to go to work tomorrow. So why should they be any different, you know? So did you have another question? No, these were adult kids, or this was an adult son that lived with her. But if we encounter families with children, we send them to Salvation Army, because they are a high barrier shelter. It's a safer environment. The language is bad. There's a lot of people get angry, throw things, kick a chair, or want to fight amongst each other. They just don't usually address, or they might cuss at us or whatever, but they don't usually are physical with us. But we don't want to really put children in that environment because of that low barrier. You have to be 18 and older to come in. Obviously, if you look younger and you don't have an ID, we're not just going to challenge you or not let you come, or we might send some food with you to go or something like that. But most of the time, it's just adults that even try to come into our facility. I don't know. It is posted on the door, so that might be one of the reasons, but we just try to send them to Salvation Army. There is a large homeless population in our county that are children, but a lot of them are sheltered. So depending on how you view the HUD definition of being homeless, it's not the same as how I view it. But so, you know, if I have my kids and I've lost my apartment, but yet I have a coworker, and so I'm staying there with them, to me, you're still homeless. It's not your home. But according to our federal guidelines, they're sheltered. They're not homeless. So they don't get to receive some of the same services. So we have a larger population of minors or families, a lot of single parents with their children that just kind of go, they're what they call couch surfing. They're bouncing from house to house, or relative to friend to neighbor to whatever. So we don't see it, like I hardly ever see any kids in these homeless camps. Actually, I can't say in the last 4 or 5 years of doing this. I mean, I've been involved in homeless ministry for many years, but actually being engaged with it at this level, I've never seen children out in those camps, or I have seen them in cars like at Walmart and things like that, but I don't see them under the bridges or in the abandoned warehouses or old businesses or houses that are run down. I don't encounter any kids. So I'm going to guess there's about what I would view as homeless in our county. There's probably 400 to 450 individuals in Licking County. No, just everybody together. Mm-hmm. Financially capable of housing. Oh, sure. And that's the main reason you don't see a lot of parents taking their kids to a shelter like Salvation Army, because they have a fear as a mom or a dad. Right. If I go in here and they know I don't have a place for my kids to go, they're going to swoop my kids up, and I'm never going to see them again. Right. So there's a big fear, big stigma. There's a need out there to protect them. Absolutely, yes. Yes. Yeah, and sadly, but I've had to, when I encountered, like mainly in Walmart parking lot at 5:30 in the morning, there's people, they're obviously sleeping in their cars. I try to give them a list of resources, and if I see them there again, then I usually just go ahead and report them, because, I have a fear for what happens to those kids. So, I don't want the kids to be taken from their families and their parents, but yet if that's the environment that they're going to be living in, then that's the risk that you take, and that's what I would lean that way, for the kids to be taken care of, especially when it comes to drug addiction and human trafficking, sex trafficking, and all the things that are. You think about these things in larger cities, but they're right here. I see this stuff weekly. I see the pimps that bring the girls to try down and get at lunch. I see the stuff that goes on. It's bad. It's wild. Well, they get there a variety of ways. You'll see a lot of bicycles, especially like the smaller, it looks like kids' BMX bikes. You'll see a lot of people that have the backpack on. So a lot of them by foot, a lot of them by bicycle. But there are, I don't know what the percentage is. I'm going to guess there's probably, of our guests that personally come to Vertical, there's maybe 30 to 35% of them are driving in a car. And it might be one person's car, but there's 4 people in there. It's not, it doesn't belong to all the people in the car, but. And then we also, not all of our 65 daily that come on an average are all unsheltered. Some of them are our former guests. We helped them get housing, but we've developed relationships with them, and I think they feel hope, they feel encouraged, they get a free meal, they get other supplies, so they still come and visit us. They kind of return. The other thing is, when we help somebody get housing, we have, back in the garage, we have housewarming boxes. So depending on if it's, just a one person, or if it's a male or a female, that, they'll have female products, or pots and pans, shower curtains, towels, dishes, silverware, the things that are necessary to set up, because they might get a place to live, but they don't have all the other things, or they're financially not stable to go buy them. And then we give them a box of food too to take with them. Do you take just fans? We do, yes. Mm-hmm. So a good rule of thumb is, during our open hours from 10 to 2, Monday through Friday, but also like tonight, we had a donation drop-in time from 5 to 6 p.m. for those that are working during the day that can't get there during the day hours. We try to accommodate that. Yes.
How do people? I know you said.
Yeah.
So
Well, a lot of our there are, and they're transient. They move, and then they have sometimes they have obstacles with city officials and so forth, and they don't always live within the rules that they're supposed to be, or they're squatting on someone else's property. Once the landowner makes the complaint, the police have to obey the law too and make the person leave. And so The police know it all throughout the county, not all throughout the county, but Newark Heath, Granville, Pataskala, Buckeye Lake. The fire department knows. But I think my involvement in the jail, that's kind of like it's a vicious cycle. Somebody will be in jail, they'll learn about vertical, they'll come there, they're still in addiction, they're still committing crimes, they go back to jail. So there's some of that. But even the probation department knows, the judges, and most of the other social services like obviously Job and Family Services, Salvation Army. We all kind of share resources and past names and those sort of things. So that's kind of how we do that. Also, the name Vertical 196, that's where I was starting. So you only said I had 2.5 hours to talk, right?
You're good.
No, so.
That's half an hour less than me.
Well, you can have my last 30 minutes then. So when I had the lookup center, and this building was gifted to me to use, now this is still owned by the foundation, but we just have use of it like we own it. So when I had the lookup center, I wanted it to be tied to lookup center, but I didn't want it to be called Lookup 2 or Lookup South. And, you know, as I would pray and think of a name, when you're looking up, you're vertical. So as a pastor, I'm a bit embarrassed to say that 196 is not a scriptural reference. It's not a verse. It's the actual physical address, Vertical 196. So that's where that name came from. But any other questions? I hope I didn't really have much prepared. I just speak from my heart and whatever's going on. So, but we can always use food products if you just want to kind of keep an eye on. If you do Facebook, if not, I could send something here to the church occasionally when we have needs. Yeah, but so you know, like spaghetti sauces and things that can go further. Ground beef, everybody's experiencing the cost of the increase of inflation. So sometimes we'll have farmers donate like a quarter hog or a half a beef or whatever, and that's really a blessing to us. Or deer hunters will donate deer to us. So that's good too, to have the venison. So we have a couple of freezers, yeah. And I would love to tour you through it sometime. I don't do tours during the day because I want to respect those that are experiencing homelessness. It's the other thing, is one of my rigid rules is you can't take pictures or photographs when you're in there working, even if you're just taking it of your coworker, because I don't want anyone to ever feel like they're being exploited. We have guests that are, some of them are high or some of them aren't, that'll just say, hey, I want to be in the picture. But, you know, you have to understand, people are at their lowest point. You don't want that to come back and haunt them, especially the way social media is and the internet. You know, that stuff's around forever. So I'm really particular. It frustrates the Columbus Dispatch, the Newark Advocate, other people that have come to do stories that I won't let them take pictures or interview any guests. But that's what we do. Also, the other thing is, if you do come to serve, be prepared to wash dishes. We don't have a commercial dishwasher. Now, during COVID, we went to disposable because of the sanitary purposes of it. But I intentionally did that because so many people that are experiencing homeless already feel like their lives are disposable. I wanted them to feel like they were at home with a home-cooked meal, so we use ceramic plates and, you know, forks. The only thing that we don't use that's disposable is spoons. As a drug addict, I would take a spoon and melt down dope and then put it, and then they don't shoot it in my arm. So we don't give you another tool to put in your toolbox. So we don't believe in clean needle exchanges or anything like that. And so you won't be washing any spoons there. So those are disposable.
How many of your guests are trying to some kind of yes? Internet or phone number.
Oh,
And
that's a great point. You needed to speak for me up here today. I forgot to tell you that one of the other obstacles, which you just named, was they can't even fill out an application without an address. They can't say the East Main Street Bridge. They can't say the abandoned house on.
yeah, so that's where I was going.
So we have probably close to 90 people right now that use 196 South Fifth Street as their physical mailing address. So we have mail call.
That they can use there to
Yeah, we have a phone, one phone there, but we control the phone because we don't want somebody to be, making a dope deal or whatever, because there are deals going on from time to time that they think they're sly, but when you used to deal drugs, and I mean, it's like, come on, dude, this was me. This was me 20 years ago. You're not that slick. I think I was even better than you. I'm a master manipulator. I think I could teach you a point or two. But anyways, so we don't just give them access to a phone. And we do have cameras there. There are some security. We have I have another ministry called 828 Enterprises that I started on February 14th of 2020, and it's independent from this, but what I'm doing is buying property. Right now I just bought it, 14 months ago I bought a property on North Cedar Street, and that's where 5 or 6 men that are former homeless, former addicts, that all work, that have come to Christ, that are willing to work and live in a Christian environment, they live there. So 2 of them actually are part-time on my staff at Vertical. So the one guy's a bigger guy that sits at the door. He's kind of like the bouncer. So,
And that leads me to another question. Maybe you have to tell a guest that
or 2 years. Yeah. So Jason, I shouldn't be naming all these people, but so I happened to pull in at lunchtime the other day, just last week, and 2 guys one tears his shirt off at the edge of the parking lot and trying to fight the other guy. And so I'm like, no, you guys aren't going to fight and whatever. And so, but this Jason that was in this fight, he just was allowed back like 3 or 4 weeks ago when it was really a cold spell. But he had been gone for 2 years. It wasn't just for one thing. Usually, depending on what you do, it's exactly like having school kids or your own kids. You try to reprimand them and try to make it into a teaching moment. You have to be. And then, if they don't get the point, depending on what they do, like I say, if you steal something, you're going to at least get 24 hours out and you're going to return what you stole. If you don't return what you stole, I call the police, because that's, I can't condone you being engaged in criminal activity. If you're under the influence or you have a bag of dope on you or something like that, I'll ask you to give it up and we'll destroy it or something like that. But this is a guy that did things continually. He was dealing drugs. He was usually the other part when there was a disruption or a physical fight between guests. He seemed to be one. I'd say, Jason, what part of this equation do you not see? You're always one half of this. Do you not see what's going on? So anyways, he got out for 2 years. We didn't say you're out 2 years. We just said you're out indefinitely. So I encountered him several times and then talked and prayed with the staff and said, let's give this guy another chance. He was doing pretty good till I think it was last Thursday or a week ago Thursday or whatever. But he's not been kicked back out. But yes, we have to do that. We have a list of probably 7 or 8 people right now that are kicked out permanently. But sometimes they get a week off, two weeks out, they can't come. But it seems like to some of them it impacts them and they come in their behavior. You see a behavior modification. You see a little different in them, at least for a short period of time. So. Did I answer all your questions? Okay, I'm sorry. They do when they're not full, but they also are a high barrier shelter. So if you breathalyze and you're under the influence, you can't come in. If you have a violent criminal history, because they're going to run a background check on you, you can't come in. I'm not putting them down. That's their policies, and I appreciate and respect that, because I have my own policies and procedures. So our local resources are very limited for that population for overnight. Sad, but that's just where we're at. Oh, somebody was asking about jobs. Do the people want to go to work? Is that one of your questions? So yeah, no, not really. It seems like there's a lot more jobs than willing bodies to go to work right now. So prior to COVID, pre-COVID, I had 42 local employers that would hire people that are coming out of the jail setting, which is pretty good. That's pretty amazing for a small community like ours. Now I got people beg me. GM from Wendy's sent me an email the other day and said, "Can you do a work release? Can you let inmates just come out to go to work at Wendy's?" So You know, I don't have the authority to do that. That's up to a judge to assign work release. But I mean, people are begging for, I mean, employers are begging for people, and a lot of the population aren't ready to go to work or don't want to go to work or something like that. Transportation? No, that's another lack in our community. They can pay to ride. Yeah, there's no free county services for them to ride. Yeah. That's something that, I think that's something the county, I was with another group that we started something, and I get to be too busy, and I just said, and then I don't think it really went anywhere. You probably saw on media like Newark Advocate a couple years ago, the Family Dollar store down by the jail. We were going to make that into a low barrier, what I'm talking about, overnight shelter, and I was a part of that group, and it just got to be so big and got political, and it didn't go anywhere. It just spun, you know, bureaucracy, and I'm like, just get dirty and do it, just go. But anyway, so we still don't have what we need in that line of a low barrier overnight shelters here locally, and transportation is very poor.
You know, you're just a free person to, you know what?
Yeah. Well, I'm not amazing, but the God we serve is amazing. So apart from him, I'm just back where I came from. So I'm just thankful that I'm not. Yeah. I mean, just like with the Lookup Center, you know, there was a time, you know, growing up with a single mom and an older brother, there was a time when we didn't have a lot to eat. And, you know, so I also have a very strong policies. We're not going to waste any of this food. If you can't use it, pass it on to another ministry or pack it up, and we'll give it to, you know, I'll hand deliver it to households or go to Section 8 apartments or whatever, because these are resources that God's provided for us, and let's not just leave them go to waste because we don't feel like taking care of stuff. So I'm not mean to work with. I'm just, you know, you have to be appreciative of what you have. But yeah, I think there is some credibility. I just in the jail, people listen to me. I don't mean that in an arrogant way at all, because if you talk to me, if they give me an extra 30 minutes, you say, "Who's that dummy up there?" But I do know what it's like to walk in their shoes, sure, for sure. Yeah.
Where is the refuge that you?
Mm-hmm.
I know there's Licking County. There's Courage.
That's correct. They're secular. They're good programs. They're secular programs that are overseen by BHP, Behavioral Healthcare Partners. The refuge ministries, there's different phases of that in Central Ohio, but there's Lancaster and Columbus are the primary locations. But if you encounter somebody that's in addiction and they say, "Hey, I'm ready for rehab," send them any Thursday to Faith United Methodist Church. It's right across the street from Sally, from Salvation Army. Every Thursday at 10 a.m., men or women, as long as they're adults, their orientation, and they can leave on the spot as long as they don't have outstanding warrants or outstanding child support or have to require psych meds. Those are the primary things that would keep them from going. But they're not required of any insurance. They don't deal with any insurance companies. Their ministry is completely underwritten by Christian people like you. They don't have to have insurance or payment or anything like that. They just have to be a willing participant that, hey, I'm going for 13 months to a Christian residential program, and they can go. They'll bus them right from there. They used to bus them from, before they had the church doing this, we would take them from Vertical to Columbus or to Lancaster, but now they did this here. And then there's another ministry that's going to have a male version of the refuge in Nashport or outside of Nashport, Ohio, that'll be opening up probably sometime within this year. Yeah, it's primarily for those struggling with substance abuse of some sort, including alcohol. You got St. Vincent Haven, that's just a couple blocks from us. That's 16 beds for men. Yes, correct, adult men, through the Catholic Church. It's a good ministry, but no counterpart to females unless the lady and or children are victims of domestic abuse. There's another good organization called New Beginnings. by the post office downtown that they can go to. But outside of that, we don't have a lot of overnight resources for people that are struggling with shelter and those sort of things. Yes, sir. My magic wand would be for substance abuse. That's the population I work with in the jail or at Vertical. My guess is that's 80 to 90% of those folks have some sort of, I mean, I might be incarcerated because I was caught stealing, but it really wasn't, I didn't really want the catalytic converter off your truck. I wanted the money to go get high. So it comes back to substance abuse, which is just sin. You know, I get in little brief arguments with people, but our government wants to brainwash people to think that, and I'm not a conspiracy guy, I'm sorry. I know this is being recorded too, but I'm being cautious of how I say this, but they say it's a disease. So if I think I have a disease, I have no ownership now. I can't help this. This is the way I was made. I was born this way. And to a degree, it is a disease. In the degree of how it affects my body, my heart, my lungs, my mind, how it changes the chemical makeup of my mind, I believe all that science. I really do. But if you keep telling people it's an addiction or it's a disease, it's a disease, it's a disease like heart disease or you have diabetes. Well, I have 22 years clean from this disease, which once I get beyond the psychological and really the physical addiction, the withdrawal, it's now a choice. You see what I mean? So addiction is it's sin, it's idolatry. It's anything that we put before God, our relationship with God. That's what it is. And so that's what I preach to the people I deal with. That's what I try to tell them. Once you have some clean time, now you go back and use, you just re-entered your life of sin. But it does no one any good just to say it's a disease and leave it at that. Like I said, I believe the science and the medical parts of that, how it affects your body. But it's a cop-out, and it's setting people up to fail. Oh, you got a disease, Scott. You know, oh, well, okay. Do this, snort this, smoke this. It's an attitude of your heart. I mean, that's what life really is, how you feel. Yeah.
I know the wait list.
Yeah. There are some good landlords. It's limited. And beyond even those that are experiencing homelessness, just affordable, safe housing is another issue. We talked about transportation, but I mean, I don't have to be homeless, but you know, I might afford to live in a house that it's not safe for my kids or it's not adequate. You know, it's my heating doesn't work or whatever, but this is all I can afford, or this is all I can have. So that's another obstacle, I think, in our community in general, is just the lack of affordable and safe, that's the other part of that, housing. But we do have a lot of land. We have lists of landlords, and some of them are property owners that, you know, they've left it in the hands of rental agents or whatever that help, management companies that help take care of that. But it's hard, especially, you know, if you get an eviction notice or two to a landlord. If I own this house and you come in and you've been evicted to the last places, why do I think that you're going to change now and pay and then take care of my place, and then I don't have to take you to court and go through this 60, 90-day process to get you out? So it is challenging, but yes, there are some that'll help. Yeah, and I've thought about some of those things too. One of the cons with the whole hotel idea is having too much independence. You almost need like dorm style, so you have more supervision of what's going on, because not everything's at face value or what you perceive it to be or what you're being told it is. But yeah, I'm not so sure my next venture is not going to be on the lines of like an orphanage. You know, we go to foreign countries and build orphanages. There's so much red tape, regulations, and bureaucracy in our nation, but we have many kids without parents, just like foreign countries. I'm not saying do away with foreign missions, but I'm just saying there's a need here that we could do. So I'm looking into that and trying to contact somebody at the governor's office to see, because, you know, there will be tons of oversight with that, which there should be, because sometimes people do things like that for all the wrong purposes. But that's a whole nother issue of why. Sorry, I got off track. Anything else? I appreciate your time very much. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm the only one that stands between you and dessert. Right?
That's right. We do
Yeah,
have
you guys
dessert
pecan
downstairs.
pie, that's all we've heard, is pecan pie.
Yeah, we have good.
Well, I was going to say that it's between me and my pecan pie, right? So we don't want that. Thank you for coming. You know, just listening to you reminds me that it isn't where we come from. It's not where we began. It's where we end up. Right, and bless you for the things that you are willing to do. You know, we are all called, and I've said this a million times to you, we are all called to certain things. And if we haven't found that calling yet, we haven't listened well enough. If you haven't had the opportunity to disciple anybody, you're not hanging out with enough sinners. If you haven't found people who are broken, you're not looking hard enough. And, you know, we talked about this last weekend, the messaging, to be courageous like Jesus was, to go out and stir the pot, you know, be a pot stirrer, find solutions, find people who are in need, and come to them with the grace that God gave us. It's not where we started, it's where we end up, and we have every capability to do that. We just have to do it, because you know, it's easy for us to say, well, you know, it's cold out there tonight, so I wear a coat and you go home and you have a warm home. We need to find how to reach to those people, whether it's us physically going out and doing it or empowering those people who have been called to do it. It still needs to be done, and we are still the ones who are responsible for it. So I look forward to this conversation is just beginning with us. Yeah, and I know the churches do a good job of ministering to people. Sometimes it's going out and doing it, putting your hands to work, putting your feet to work, to be able to talk to somebody who needs an ear to hear what they're really trying to say. And again, the more we are in that environment, the more we learn from those people, the better disciple makers we're going to be. And I think that's a little bit lost with the conversation we had today in terms of the physical needs. It's the spiritual needs, right? To be able to witness to people, to disciple people, is something that we are not very good at because we're afraid of what that looks like. We're afraid of that. We're afraid that might expose something in our own heart and our own soul that we can grow with others. But like I said, if you can't disciple the unchurched until you get in front of them, until you walk with them in their environment, in their shoes. And so we need to make sure that as Christians, we are rocking the boat, and we are finding those people. We are turning over rocks and finding those people out there and finding the right solution, the beginning of the right solution for them. So again, Pastor, God bless you for what you're doing. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this time to be together in fellowship with one another. It is an opportunity for us to grow closer to your grace so that we can share your grace with other people. But it is only by our willingness to go out and share that grace does your grace continue to get spread. We are the little hands and feet of the prevenient grace, the grace that chases us down, the grace that changes our hearts and changes our minds. We are the ones, we are the voices, we are the hands, we are the legs, we are the feet of those people. We are the ones who are willing to take time. We need to be those people who are willing to take time out of their days to go and feed those people who have no food, to help shelter those people who have no shelter. So, Father, put it on our heart. Put it on our heart to be able to do these things and step away from our coziness and go out to where it's tough, because those people are in need of lots of things. So, Heavenly Father, just thank you for the word that was brought to us today, and again, lay it heavy on our heart, so heavy that we need something. We need to do something to make a change in the world around us, to share your love and your grace with the people who need it most. In Jesus' holy name, amen. All right. Thank God. I'm done, right? Okay, now.
We have just